Hi everybody, welcome to the formatting with CSS video. I will say possibly part 1. We have a lot to cover in the video and I have a limit of 15 minutes. So if we have to go over 15 minutes, we will stop the video and then we'll finish up in a second one in case. I don't know. I'll try to go as fast as I can. Unfortunately, I tend to ramble. So this video is a follow-up to the portfolio HTML elements video. And if you remember, we left off here with this pretty boring looking HTML page. But what we did in the page is we used the HTML5 page layout tags that we learned in section 3. So that's the header tag, the nav tag, the section tag, and the footer tag, right? So we just flushed out the HTML for those elements. So now we're going to actually use some CSS to format our page. And I just want to show you, this is where we're starting from, and this is where we're going, okay? So through the use of CSS, and I'm going to make a little bit of updates to the HTML just to include a couple of images is all. This is where I will go to. I'll take this from there to there, mostly with just CSS. Okay. So I do want to point out the palette that I had selected previously just wasn't working for me. So I ended up swapping out for a new color palette. Okay. So sometimes that might happen. You may have this idea for a color palette. You see it and you're like, yeah, I can make that work. And then you start playing with it and you're like, no, it doesn't look so good. Don't worry about it. If it's not working for you, you can just swap out color palettes like I did. Okay. So it's your page, it's your portfolio. You want it to represent how you feel, how you want to convey an image. This color palette was working for me. Okay. So with that, we're going to get started. We're going to add some CSS to our HTML page that we have, the index page, and we're going to make internal style. We're going to add an internal style sheet. So to do that, I want to have the style tags up in the head, right? They go up in the head. Okay. The next thing I want to do is I'm just going to add element selectors for all of the HTML5 tags that we were introduced to. So header, nav, section, and footer. Okay, I'm going to save that. One thing to note, I'm using Control S. I'm not coming up here to File Save. Okay, so I will be saving, you know, every time I will save before I ever refresh the browser. Okay, so you just won't see me come up here to File. It's Control S as a shortcut to save. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here. I'm going to use the display rule and I'm going to set it to block. If you remember, we used this rule previously when centering images. And so what the display block does is it specifies, you know, can something be displayed next to this or can it not? Okay, so when you specify something as block, it means that that section, that area, is going to go all the way from the left side of the browser. The block is going to go all the way to the right side of the browser. So nothing besides the header can be within this area. Okay, we want that same principle added, the same kind of look added to all the other sections, because we're just creating this nice symmetrical look, right? Just these blocks on top of one another. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to add this same rule to each of our element selectors. Okay, and you'll notice I am starting to stack my rules. Reason being, I'm going to add more rules than just one, and so it generally looks cleaner if I stack them. Okay, so I'm going to save this. I'm going to refresh, and we shouldn't see any difference because it's not really something that you notice. Okay, so then the next thing that I want to do is I want to start adding some background color. Okay, so let's take a look here at how I wanted it done. I've got a background color for the header. I've got the same background color for the nav and the footer, and I'm going to stick with a white section. And that's general. We generally keep the section white and the text black just for ease of reading. Okay, so that's what I'm going to go with here. So let's program that. So within the header, I've got the background rule. I'm going to come here and I'm going to grab it from my palette. It's this one. Okay, I'm going to save and let's see what that looks like. Okay, so now the whole block, the whole header block has been made blue, and you'll notice I can no longer see the text because there's not enough contrast. I'm not going to worry about this though, because I'm going to put an image there and I'm going to remove the text anyway in a couple of minutes. Okay, so I'm not going to worry about that. So now I'm going to add the background color to the nav. Grab that color from here. I saved it, and there's the background color for that. Since it's the same color, background color for the footer as the nav is, I'm just going to copy that and paste it. I'm going to save, and there we go. Okay. So now the next thing I want to do is now I want to get rid of this text here in the header, and I actually want to put my image there. Okay, so this is where I'm like, so the bulk of this video is like 95% CSS, but there is some HTML, and here's one of the areas where I have to do some HTML. So I'm going to come in here into the header section. I'm going to delete the text, the paragraph text, and I'm going to add an image. And I'm going to use the source attribute to specify to the browser where the image is at. I have my image in an images folder, and it is called header image.png. I'm going to save this and just make sure that it came in correctly. It did. I'm going to add the alt attribute, and I'm just going to say header image. And I'm going to add the title attribute and say oops, and say header image as well. Okay. Refresh. If I hover over it, it'll say header image. Okay. So with that, so the next thing I'm looking at here is the image is off center, right? So, and I'm not a fan of where the text is, how it's all left aligned. So I want to center the image, and I'm going to want to center the text in the nav bar, and I'm going to want to center the text in the footer. So let's first start with centering the image. Okay, so I'm going to create a class selector this time instead of an element selector for the image tag. Reason being, I'm going to add another image in a moment, that spacer image that we created previously. I'm going to add that, and I don't want it centered. Okay, so if I were to create an element selector, it would make all the images centered. I don't want that. I just want the header image centered. So I'm going to make a class selector instead. So I'm going to call it centered image. Okay, and I'm gonna, we were talking about how we had seen this rule before the display block. We saw it when we were centering images, and so along with the display block we also use the margin left rule, and we set it to auto, and it goes along with the margin right set to auto as well. Okay, I'm gonna close this up. Okay, nothing happened. Why? Because it is a class selector. It doesn't automatically apply to a tag. Instead, I have to come down here into the place that I want to make centered, which is this image, right? And I'm going to add the class attribute. Nope. And it is called centered image. Okay, now refresh. That should center us? It does. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to tackle is centering my nav and my footer text. We have seen this quite a bit, this rule. Okay, it's the text align rule. And we set it to center. I'm just going to copy this. And I'm going to paste it to the footer. Save it. Refresh. Okay. Starting to look more and more like what I have here. Okay. Okay, so one thing we'll notice about the final product is that the nav bar is a bit taller. The height is a bit bigger than in our current work in progress. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I am going to adjust the height of the nav area. Okay, so and that rule is just height, and it takes pixels. So I'm going to say I'd like it to be 25 pixels. Okay, so I'm going to refresh this, and it's still not quite what I want because I do want more space between the header than I have, but it's starting to get to what I'd like. So I'm going to leave it at this for now. Okay. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I want to change the font of all of the text on my page. I'm not a fan of the serif text. I don't like the little feet on all of the letters. So I want to use a sans serif font. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to look at just the font family list. Okay, so I'm going to come down here and the font, we've got sans serif font families. Okay, and just in looking at this, I really like the way Verdana looks. Okay. And I really like the way Trebuchet looks. So I'm going to use those in a font family. Okay, so and we're changing the font family of the nav, the section, and the footer. Okay, so I'm going to say font family. The one that I prefer most, the one that I would like the browser to try first, is Verdana. If the user doesn't have Verdana, then please try Trebuchet. This is me speaking to the browser. And then finally, if the user's computer doesn't have the Verdana font or the Trebuchet, I just say, hey, can you please just use whatever sans serif font you have on the computer? Okay, so let's see if that changed the nav. It did. All right, so I like the way that looks, and I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to apply it to the section and to the footer. I'm going to save that, and that's looking a lot better. I like that look a lot better. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is, I'm not a fan of the page heading being black. Okay, so instead I want to tie our color scheme together more, and I'm going to use this the header's background color as the text color for page heading. So that is an H1, right? It's an H1 header. And so I have to add an H1 element selector up here in my styles. Okay, so I'm going to place it here between the footer and the centered image. Reason being, all of these up here, they're all element selectors. This is a class selector. I'm adding an element selector. I like to keep them together. Okay. So I'm going to use color this time, not background color, because I'm just changing the color of the text. Okay, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to grab the color of the header, paste it down here. I'm going to save it and then refresh it in the browser, and that's looking a lot better. Okay. The next thing that I want to tackle here is I want the links to be bold. Okay, so in order for all of the links to be bold, I'm going to add another element selector. I'm going to add the A element selector, and I'm going to use the font family, font weight rule, and I'm going to set it to bold. Okay, I'm going to save that, and I'm going to refresh it, and yeah, that's looking a little better. Okay, so I'm going to pause right here. We're going to end this video, and we're going to pick up from here in part 2. We don't have a lot more to do to get it to where we need it to be, so we're moving along good.